Hello and welcome to my very first live clinic Q&A. I'm Lila, founder and lead clinician at the Virtual Natural Healing Clinic. This is a space that I've created to help people. We do one-on-one work and help people with chronic and complex health challenges find the relief that they absolutely deserve and seek. My mission is to help people find their health and happiness, and one way I get to do that is through my clinical practice. A little bit about how this is going to go before we start. This is my first one, so format may change. I have questions submitted ahead of time, and if people hop on live, we can add their questions as well. I will save the recording, upload it to my YouTube channel and my podcast so you guys can catch the recording later. And we are just tackling people's burn and health questions. I think that a lot of things talked about in the wellness space need a lot more nuance and context than is actually given. And this is the space to have clinically grounded conversations about what works, what doesn't work, what might work for you, what might not work for someone else. This is a way to cut through the noise to get clear information that you can rely on. My whole clinic, my motto is we are rooted in wisdom, but we're driven by results. So we're doing things that have traditional scientific or clinical backings, and we are doing things that actually help people get results. So I will tackle the questions, but before we get started, a little bit about me and my background. My first career, I worked in IT software development. I was a chief technology officer before I stepped away and realized that wasn't for me. I wasn't fulfilling. My health was suffering. I was forever anxious and depressed and really just not loving life. So I went on a new journey to figure out what it took for me to find my health and happiness. And I never planned on being in the natural healing space, pursuing any sort of clinical practice or anything like that. But through the twists and turns of life, that is where I ended up. And I now get to help serve people in a way that I wish I could have been served many, many moons ago. So I am a clinical herbalist, and I practice from a planetary perspective, meaning I pull from all three of the big systems. That's Western herbalism, Ayurveda, and traditional Chinese medicine. And I get to bring in all the tools and kind of give people the best of all the worlds. I also am a certified functional nutrition counselor. So I do a lot with functional nutrition. I love the principles of functional medicine and functional nutrition when applied appropriately. Maybe we'll get to talk about the functional medicine craze at some point in our work on this channel. But today I will save you my rant. I also love yoga, meditation. I bring in some spiritual concepts into my practice because I do believe that healing is a spiritual journey, and there is more than just the physiology that needs to be addressed. So sometimes we need tools outside of affecting the physical body or the mental body and helping people in other ways. So I really do a good job of bringing all these perspectives together, recognizing patterns, and making it applicable and relevant to the person I'm working with. Everything I do is really based in individualized care. I don't use standard protocols or processes. I've tried, it doesn't work. It's not what people need to heal. People need space. They need to be heard. They need things that are specific to them and where they're at in life. I learned really early on, you can write the perfect protocol, but if somebody can't execute it or make it work for them, then it doesn't even matter what's on that piece of paper. So that's a little bit about me and my background. I'm happy to answer any more questions on that at any point if anything comes up. But if not, we're going to dive in. So let me pull up some of the questions that we had submitted and we will get to work. So question number one, and this is a big one. I get this and I see this a lot. My doctor keeps telling me my labs look normal. I look at my labs and the labs look normal. Everything is in range, but I still don't feel good. What's going on? What do I do? So this is a really big problem because the way that doctors look at lab work is different than the way someone like myself or a functional medicine doctor might look at lab work. So when your medical doctor looks at your lab work, they are looking to find pathology or disease states. These are lab markers that are so out of range that there is disease present. So when they're looking at your vitamin D level, they are looking at a level to ensure that you don't have rickets. You have enough vitamin D not to be in a disease state. They make sure you have enough vitamin C that you don't have, that actually don't test vitamin C, so that's a bad example. But they're looking at your lab work for disease. But the thing is, it's a spectrum. It's not you have a disease, you don't have a disease. You could be anywhere along the spectrum of dysfunction. So we have optimal places for our lab range, and then we have dysfunctional disease states, but there's a whole world in between these two. So when I look at lab work, I'm not looking for what's pathological, what can I diagnose? That's not what I do. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm looking for what isn't optimal, what systems are underperforming, what nutrients are underrepresented. We are looking for optimization to make sure the body's functioning as well as it could. We're not looking for, are you in a disease state or not? And that is the biggest difference. So when I look at vitamin D, I'm like, do you have enough vitamin D to run all the processes in your body that require vitamin D? When your medical doctor is looking at vitamin D, he just wants to know that you do not have rickets. So we are looking at lab work in a completely different way. And it's so interesting to me because a lot of people come forth with lab work and they're like, everything's normal. But when I look at their lab work, I have a huge plethora of information that I get to start using to find patterns. So I get to look at how the metabolic processes are running. I get to look at what our nutrient statuses are. I get to look at how our organ systems are performing. Are we inflamed? What's present? What's not present? And we get to optimize from there. And a lot of times this optimization is really, really impactful. Dialing in certain markers, dialing in certain pieces of this picture is huge. Now, I tell every client I work with, I don't need lab work. We do not need lab work to successfully move your needle forward, but it's really, really helpful. It's really helpful for tracking progress, especially if somebody has a hard time tuning into their body. It's really helpful for low-hanging fruit. It's really helpful to affirm the patterns I'm seeing, and it's really helpful to make sure we're dialing things in optimally and quickly. So I use loading doses. I use tools to help people feel better quickly so they have space to do longer, more sustainable work, because when you're not feeling good, it's really hard to make a lot of changes and stick with those changes. So lab work is absolutely beneficial. And just because your lab looks normal from your medical doctor, or I will even know, because this is really a big thing I'm actually seeing, people are taking labs through functional health, and they assume that functional health is looking at their labs in a functional way. But functional health has a lot of conventional lab ranges on there. So your functional health panel might say everything's in range. It might say that your biological age is 20 years lower than it is. But when I look at functional health panels, I am just actually a little flabbergasted that they're presenting them the way they are, because they are marking things as in range or good or optimal when they are really not from a functional perspective. And it's something that I see when I start dialing in the labs the way that I want them to be, then people start feeling better. The one last thing I want to note on lab work. Oh, what was I going to say? I don't remember. Maybe it'll come back to me. But lab work, again, great tool. It's really, really beneficial in practice to look at things from a functional, optimal standpoint. I will say that it's really important that you don't just look at one marker as being out of range and think that you need to correct just that one marker. Labs have to be looked at in a constellation. Everything interplays together. So it's not just like iron's low, give iron. There's more nuance to the picture, and we need to be just looking at that. The other thing I want to note, that's what it was, is that labs are transient. So just because we get a snapshot in time of our lab work doesn't necessarily mean that's the ongoing pattern or it's representative of the whole. So that's why it's really important not to get in too big of a frenzy over one single lab panel, because labs change and it's patterns over time that we want to look at. And then the other thing I just want to note is that everybody has a little bit of a different set point. So the way that we look at lab ranges are just looking at averages on whole for total populations. But some people, they naturally tend towards different markers, and that's okay. You know, some people maybe have naturally higher cholesterol and it's not pathological or problematic. Some people might have lower cholesterol, and again, it might not be pathological or problematic, which is why it's so important that we look at everyone on an individualized basis. We track trends for them, and we dial in what's specific and needed for them. So that's a really great question. Lab work is absolutely super important. And just because your medical doctor says your labs look good, or you look at your, you log into Quest or LabCorp and you see everything in the green, doesn't mean that what you're looking at isn't, there's not more to the picture. Second question, and this one is kind of juicy. I'm interested in getting into natural healing and starting to do some parasite cleanses. What's a good one to use? So parasite cleanses, for some reason, we've started equating natural healing with parasite cleanses, and I'm not sure why. I do know that there's cycles, and every once in a while, something new gets trending, whether it's SIBO or Candida or parasites. Something is kind of the new poster child for natural healing, and we start pinning a lot of problems and blame on that. So parasites are a problem. They do exist, but I think that the natural healing and wellness world way overblows the prevalence of parasites. But I also think that the medical world, and in America specifically, way undervalues the prevalence of parasites. So the truth, as always, lies somewhere in the middle. And we do have to acknowledge, like, we are in a country that has high standards of cleanliness. Not that our farm animals are treated as top tier as they could, absolutely not. But we know to cook our meats thoroughly. We have clean water. So a lot of the exposure that happens in America is a lot less than people think it is. The rate of parasites it's increased if you are engaging in certain things. I had Giardia a few years ago because, well, that's a whole story from another day. But if you're traveling out of the country or things like that, then your risk for parasites is going to be increased. Now, the thing about parasites is we don't need to just look at the fact that we have a parasite. We need to look at how did we get this parasite, because our body has natural defense systems built in to take care of invaders coming in from the external world. So one of the biggest exposures that we have to the external world is eating. We are taking food in from the external world. We're putting it through our digestive system. Our digestive system's job is to convert that food into something usable nutrients for the body, and then eliminate the rest. But we have defense systems built in to prevent invaders from, one, entering the system and taking root. Well, no, just that's it, entering the system and taking root. So if they enter the system, ideally they're eradicated and then not allowed to take root. So what happens is people's defense systems get eroded or weakened, and we have a poor foundation of health. We have an imbalance in the body. So I don't look at parasites as a root cause. I look at parasites as a symptom. They give us information for what's going on in your body. So if you have a parasite, we need to also look at what is going on in your body that allowed the parasite to take root. So eradicating the parasite, if there is one present, is absolutely important. But we need to not just look at it in a vacuum. We need to look at the whole system, how it's operating. Somebody might be in too weak a frail or just not strong enough place to do intense detoxification to get rid of a parasite. Sometimes you have to build first before you can eradicate. There is so much nuance that goes on when it comes to actually using parasite cleanses. Now, I am really not impressed with any of the parasite cleanses I see on the market. I will call out Cellcore as one that I just don't think is impressive. I know there's a lot of people on there making tinctures of black walnut hull, garlic, things like that, papaya, pumpkin seeds. Like there's all kinds of notions for what should get rid of a parasite and what'll work and what doesn't work. I see that the parasite cleanses that are normally sold and peddled, especially by these just wellness influencers, I don't know what else to call them, are weak sauce. I think the dosing's low. I don't think there's something that is going to be helpful. They expect people to come back and do these cleanses yearly because the things, are expected to come back, I guess. And they really don't make it a one and done process. So if I'm working with someone with verified or suspected parasites, we will put them on a parasite cleanse. It'll be intense for a short amount of time, and then we will specifically do some sort of purging to flush the system, and then we'll reassess and see, okay, did we eradicate or do we need to do this again? But again, it's really important that we're doing it conscientiously. I don't think parasite cleansing to be proactive is appropriate. I don't think blaming symptoms automatically on parasites is appropriate, because a lot of times we need to make sure that foundations are in place before jumping to blaming some complex external factor like parasites. So it's not a place that I go first. It's not something I recommend that people just erroneously do. There are consequences. A lot of the detoxifying herbs are very depleting. If you are not in a place where your body can handle a lot of depletion, then it's going to be problematic. So when talking about parasites, I just want you to know that there's a lot more nuance to the conversation, and you need to think about, is somebody trying to sell me something with a parasite cleanse? I do think if you do have suspected parasites, you should work with a practitioner and do things appropriately. We have a lot of really great parasite remedies, especially in Ayurveda. Ayurveda has acknowledged krumi, or these external beings that come into our systems, for thousands of years, and they have a lot of really good tools in the tool belt to get rid of them. I'll be the first to tell you that I think a lot of the parasite cleanses that are being pushed are just not going to do it. So that is that. If there's follow-up questions on that, I would love to hear them. But as with anything in dealing with anything chronic or even acute, I think an individualized approach is still the best way to go. Okay, next question. I'm really struggling to lose weight. I keep eating less and less, but the weight still goes up. Help! This is actually something I see really often in practice. My practice is predominantly women at the moment. And a lot of them come to me wanting to lose weight. It's not a predominant driver of why we're working together, but it's just one of my secondary things that comes up is I'd like to lose some weight. And the people I notice are usually under eating. Most women I work with are under eating. And so they're under eating, but they're wondering why they're not losing weight. And I think the conversation around weight loss needs a lot more nuance. Weight loss is not as simple as calories in versus calories out, because there are other things at play. So if we don't feel safe enough to shed weight, our body is going to cling. If we're under eating to the point where our body's getting put into survival mode, our body's not going to feel safe enough to let go of weight, because weight is our protection. It is protecting us from the world. So we need a certain level of nervous system regulation and just safety in our bodies to be able to lose weight. The other thing is, a lot of times people are so depleted nutrient wise. A lot of the people I work with are what I call undernourished but overfed. So we're getting enough macros and calories, but we're not getting enough nutrients in our diet. So in this scenario, their bodies become in a state of stress or survival mode because they don't have enough nutrients to run the ship. So if we don't have enough nutrients to run the ship, even If we have enough calories, that's definitely going to show up in a certain way, which again might be the body clinging to fat, not letting it go. There's been some really interesting studies linking obesity to magnesium deficiencies. And there's also components of, we have inflammation that gets involved. We have our metabolisms that get kind of distorted and warped over time. And if, we're running really metabolically cold, if we're, under eating, we're under fueling a fire, there's not enough fire to burn off the fat. It becomes this whole kind of inverse problem. So a lot of times when people want to lose weight, we have to look at some other layers first, and dialing in or scaling back calories is definitely not the first place I start with most people. We need to dial in, our detox pathway open? Is our body able to take in food and eliminate waste appropriately? Because if we're not eliminating waste appropriately, that waste is going to back up. It's going to cause inflammation. It's going to cause our body not to be operating properly. And that's one place that's going to hinder weight loss. We need to look at, are we sleeping? So much happens when we are sleeping, including a lot of our detoxification and repair processes. So you could be eating the perfect diet, you could be eating at the perfect calorie deficit, but if you're not sleeping, your body's going to be stressed, you're going to be producing more cortisol, you're going to be producing more insulin, you are not going to have the safety in your body because your nervous system is going to be dysregulated to shed fat. And then the other thing we might need to look at is, what is your resting metabolic demand? Are we needing to bring in more movement? Are we needing to bring in some exercise, some weightlifting, some muscle building? These things become really, really helpful. So checking nutrient status, checking that we're sleeping, checking that our detox pathways are open, and then checking that our nervous system actually feels safe. A lot of times people just naturally start losing weight when we work together. Again, even though it's not a primary or front goal for many of the people I work with, they're coming in with chronic illness or chronic health pain points. And then, like I said, the weight is secondary. But once we start normalizing the systems, giving the system what it needs, it feels safe enough to start finding that set point and that balance point and that point of dynamic balance. So it's just more complicated than eat less, because at a certain point, you probably need to eat more for your body to actually feel safe and confident to get rid of what it doesn't need anymore. That's a great question. As everything, I will just bring it back to an individualized approach is best, and restricting is going to be stressful for your psyche. It's going to be stressful for your body. It's not going to be very pleasant. So I do not recommend just overly and continually restricting. And then the last question I'm going to answer today is, I eat clean, healthy, lots of smoothies and salads, but I'm bloated all the time. What is going on? So this is another really common one I get. People think that they're eating healthy diets. People think that, the cold salads, the cold smoothies are going to be the healthy thing, because we have a society that's kind of made those things the poster child of eating healthy. But what happens is these things are actually really heavy and hard to digest. And over time, because of modern assaults, because of modern medication, stress, standard American diets, all of these reasons, our stomach juices, our digestive fires get diminished. And when our digestive fires don't have enough juice to digest food, and we are not breaking everything down fully, that can lead to bloating and gas and gastric discomfort and distension. So what needs to usually happen in a situation like that with that limited piece of information is, one, we need to pull out the foods that are actually really hard to digest, and that is raw, cold foods. Those are so hard to digest. There's a lot to break down. Plants are really fibrous. Cold is the opposite of hot, and our digestive fire needs to be hot and roaring to properly break down food. So the more cold things we put on it, the more work it has to do. So increasing digestive fire, increasing digestive juices and capability is the first piece of that puzzle. And doing so, we also just need to be conscientious about what we're eating. So cold salads are actually something I usually end up taking out of a lot of people's diets, because a lot of people can't adequately digest the cold veggies. The smoothies are also really interesting. So we're breaking food down into almost a pre-digested form, but we're also asking our body, one, it's cold, so that's going to quell our digestive fires, but we're asking our body to do a lot at once with a smoothie. Most times when people drink a smoothie, they're not giving any indication to their body that a meal is coming. We're not chewing. And so we're taking in a very concentrated, very dense amount of nutrients at one time, but we haven't properly preheated the oven. So smoothies, because they're cold, because they're dense, depending on what's going in them, they might have a lot of fiber or plants. They can be actually really hard to digest and break down. So one small tweak is maybe make sure your smoothie's room temperature, not cold. Chew your smoothie. Actually go through the process of chewing your smoothie, because the first place that food actually starts breaking down is in the mouth. So we'll have saliva mixed with the food, and those salivas carry digestive enzymes that, again, will start breaking things down. So chewing the smoothie, chewing any food properly actually is going to be really helpful for the digestive process. That is a mechanical piece of digestion that we are responsible for. And if we aren't adequately doing our part, then when we send that food to the stomach's going to have more work to do. And if it doesn't have enough digestive fire to do that work, then we are just setting our digestive failure up for failure. So when taking in smoothies, make sure the room temperature, and add warming spices. Add cinnamon and clove and cumin or ginger, things that'll warm up the smoothie and give some benefit and help to the digestive system. And then also just check what's in your smoothie. You might be doing a protein powder or something your body doesn't agree with. It might be too nutrient dense. It might not be a good fit for you at this point in your healing journey. Especially, we're still in winter, kind of coming out into winter, going into spring. If you're doing a lot of cold, heavy smoothies, salads, foods, our body's not ready for that. This is not the time of year for that. So we're going to wait until summer, when it's hotter, when we have higher digestive fire, to bring in those types of food. But a lot of things, just to bring this all back and together, a lot of things that we think are quote unquote healthy might be hard to digest, or our digestive system might not be capable. So warm, cooked foods is usually pretty safe for most, if not all, people. Okay, I am going to leave some links if anybody's interested in getting further one-on-one support. If you guys have future questions for upcoming Q&As, if you're interested in a free initial consult and seeing what getting personalized care would look like for you, I will leave links in the description and the show notes, wherever you're watching this. And I encourage you to come back to our next live Q&A and submit your questions ahead of time or come live, and we can have some more conversation about some of the health topics that there's a lot of confusion on. I'm Lila. I'm the lead clinician and founder of the Virtual Natural Healing Clinic. This is the space that I created to make natural healing care that's effective, accessible to people. And I absolutely love the work I get to do. So if you guys are interested, feel free to reach out, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.